My name is Chloe. I'm 48 years old and have been a housewife for most of my life. I've been married to Thomas for 24 years. We met shortly after I finished college. My mom, who was a teacher, introduced us. Thomas was also a teacher and seemed kind, handsome, and responsible. At first, I felt lucky. Growing up, I was often alone. My parents were always busy coaching school sports, and after my grandmother passed, I didn't have anyone at home. That's why I always dreamed of having a close family. When Thomas and I got married, we agreed I'd stay home to raise our future children, and he'd support us. It felt like a perfect plan. But things didn't go the way I imagined. As years passed, I noticed he spent more and more time away, working late, going out with colleagues, or meeting former students. I told myself it was just part of his job, but deep down, I felt like something was off. In the beginning, Thomas was charming. He made me feel appreciated. He'd say things like, "Chloe, you keep this house running." And I believed it. I handled everything, cleaning, cooking, bills, and later, raising our son Brian. I took pride in being dependable, but over time our conversations became short and cold. He'd only talk when he needed something. Weekends were the worst. Thomas was almost never home. He'd say he was drinking with coworkers or helping students. I tried to be patient. My own parents were teachers too, but they always made time for each other. Thomas didn't. I started feeling invisible. Even after Brian was born, nothing changed. I hoped fatherhood would make Thomas more involved, but he didn't try. Eventually, I spoke up and asked if he could stay home more. Instead of understanding, he got upset. He said I didn't know what it was like to need people to talk to at work. That moment, something between us quietly broke. Years went by. Thomas stayed distant, but two of his former students, Miller and Martin, started visiting often. They were cheerful and kind and treated me with respect. They also got along well with Brian, who was now in college. Their visits brought some life into the house. One day they stopped by unexpectedly, but Thomas wasn't home. I apologized, thinking they'd leave, but they asked for Brian. He came out of his room quickly and left with them. I noticed he looked serious, like something was bothering him. I felt uneasy but didn't ask questions. Later, I walked past Brian's room and saw his phone ringing. He had forgotten it. I picked it up to bring it to him, and by accident, tapped the screen. It opened to a message from Miller. The message made my heart stop. There was a picture. Thomas had his arm around a young woman and they were entering a hotel. I felt dizzy. The truth hit me hard. The message said the girl might be from a club, and Miller had followed them secretly. Brian's reply shocked me even more. He said he'd keep quiet to protect me. I stood frozen in my son's room, heart racing. I hadn't planned to look, but now I knew. My husband was cheating. I wanted to confront him, scream, cry, but I didn't. Brian was job hunting, and I didn't want to make things harder for him, so I kept quiet. Days turned into weeks. Thomas came and went like always, pretending everything was fine. Brian and I didn't say a word, but something had changed. The silence in the house felt heavier. We were all pretending. Then Christmas came closer, and we had plans to celebrate Brian's new job. But Thomas told us he'd be out for a year-end party on Christmas Eve. That date felt too personal. I didn't believe him, but I stayed silent. Then Brian surprised me with a dinner invitation. Brian said he got dinner vouchers for a fancy hotel. He insisted I go with him. When I asked if he wanted to invite a friend or a girlfriend, he said no. He wanted to spend the evening with me. I was touched. It had been years since we did anything special together. I decided to accept. I even got excited about dressing up and going out. I didn't know then that Brian had planned something bigger. On the night of the 24th, we arrived at the hotel. It was beautiful. quiet, and filled with couples. We were seated near a large window. Then I heard a voice behind me. I froze. It was Thomas. He was dressed in a sharp suit and sitting across from a young woman wearing heavy makeup and flashy clothes. I leaned slightly to hear. What he said next made my blood run cold. My wife and son died. You're all I have now. Will you marry me? I couldn't believe it. My husband, the father of my child, was proposing to someone else and saying we were dead. I stared at Brian. He had heard it too. Neither of us spoke. I felt rage, pain, and disbelief all at once. We nodded at each other. It was time. We stood up and walked to their table. I looked directly at Thomas and said, "Hi, your dead family is here. We've returned from the afterlife, just for you." Thomas's face turned pale. The woman, confused, asked who we were. Thomas stammered, trying to play it off, calling us strangers. But Brian pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. "This is my parents' marriage certificate," he said. The woman's smile faded. She turned to Thomas, furious. "You told me they were dead," she said. Thomas had no response. That's when Brian revealed we had proof of everything, and that an attorney was watching nearby, ready to act if needed. I turned and saw Martin's father seated across the room with Miller. Martin's dad was a lawyer. Together with Miller and Martin, Brian had planned the whole thing. They had been quietly investigating Thomas's affair for months. The hotel dinner tickets had come from Miller's relative who worked there. Everything was set up to catch Thomas red-handed. I looked at my son, stunned. He had done all this to protect me. Then Martin stood and revealed something else. The young woman Thomas had proposed to wasn't named Arya. Her real name was Mia. She had been one of Thomas's students years ago. She had dropped out during her first year. When Thomas heard this, he looked shocked. "Mia, that's you?" he said. She tried to deny it, but Martin showed a photo from a yearbook. Her identity was clear. Finally, she gave up and admitted it. "Yes, I'm Mia." And I wanted revenge. Mia began to explain. She said she had been ignored and bullied in school and that Thomas never helped her. He favored the popular kids and didn't notice her struggles. When she saw him years later at the club where she worked, she recognized him immediately. So she decided to get close to him, gain his trust, make him fall in love, and break his marriage. She cried as she spoke. A part of me felt sorry for her, but what she did still hurt. Thomas, now embarrassed, said, "You played with my feelings? What about me?" I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood up and said, "Stop playing the victim. You cheated. You lied. I've had enough." Everyone in the restaurant was watching, but I didn't care. This was years of pain coming out. Brian stood by my side, silent but strong. Then Martin's father stepped in and said, "This should go to court. Chloe, you have every right to claim alimony." Thomas was stunned. Mia also stepped forward and said she'd pay her share too. The truth had fully come out. There was no turning back. We divorced shortly after. I claimed alimony from Thomas. Mia offered to help, but I turned her down. She seemed truly sorry, and part of me believed she had suffered once too. After the trial, word spread through Thomas's school. Parents complained, students lost respect, and the school asked him to resign. No nearby schools wanted to hire him after that. The only job offer he got was from a small school far in the countryside, but he refused it. Eventually, he couldn't pay rent anymore and got kicked out of his apartment. He tried moving in with Miller, but Miller said, "Don't ruin the respect I had for you." Thomas had nowhere to go. He vanished. No one knows where he is now, and honestly, I don't care. That chapter is closed for good. After the divorce, Brian started his own life and moved out. I stayed with my parents for a while. Then, something unexpected happened. I grew close to Martin's father, the lawyer who had helped us. We spent more time together, talked often, and built a bond. Eventually, we fell in love. He asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Now, I work part-time at his law office. It's a fresh start. I feel seen, valued, and supported in a way I never was before. I spent so many years staying quiet, trying to keep the peace. But now I've finally found peace. Real peace. I'm starting a new chapter, not as someone's wife, but as a woman who stood up for herself, healed, and moved forward.